Bread and Butter has always been a company with decent paddles and more exceptional marketing. The paddles have never been bad, but there's almost always been better alternatives, and for some, the graphics were just too flashy. Well, that finally changes with the brand new foam Loco lineup. I've been maining this paddle for just about a month now, and I really think it's one of the best foam options to consider right now. So let's talk about it. The Loco can be purchased for $199, but after discount code PBStudio, that price drops down to $180. The Loco comes in 3 shapes. They have a wide body, a hybrid, and an elongated, with basically all of them being very traditionally shaped. So they should have a paddle shape that fits just about everyone, which is really nice because not every company has all 3 shapes for foam paddles right now, which can definitely make picking a paddle more limiting for some players. For most of my testing in this review, I played with the wide body, but I did test the hybrid and elongated as well. You can see all the detailed specs on screen right now about handle length, twist weight, and so on, but the swing weights of our specific units were as follows. The wide body was 110, the hybrid was 112, and the elongated was 123. Besides the elongated shape, these are all in pretty typical swing weight ranges for each shape. The elongated is definitely going to be for people who enjoy or don't mind swinging heavier paddles though. 123 is creeping into the realm of a heavy paddle if you aren't already used to that swing weight. Now, of course, we may have just gotten a heavier unit, but I did just want to throw that out there. If you're sensitive to heavy paddles, just be aware. As far as the core design goes, it's very similar to other foam options that we've seen on the market, which is the EPP center foam core along with the EVA foam ring around the edges. And one of the differences from some of the other foam paddles is that instead of only carbon fiber layers, it's using a carbon fiber, fiberglass, carbon fiber layup. And that fiberglass layer adds just a little bit more punch and stiffness than some of the other foam paddles out there right now, which can make it feel more responsive and give more feedback. The one drawback I do want to point out is that currently the Loco only has a 6-month warranty when most competitors in the foam market are now doing at least 1 year or even up to a lifetime warranty. So do just know that if warranty is a big reason for you to purchase a paddle, it is lower than some of the competition right now. All right, let's dive into how this paddle actually plays. There's been a lot of overwhelmingly great foam paddles that have launched in the last 3 to 4 months, and I honestly wasn't sure where the Loco was going to slot in. On one extreme end of the paddle market, you have the Selkirk Boomstick, which is one of the poppiest and largest sweet spot paddles you can buy, and it also has the price tag of $333 to back it up. Then on the other extreme, you have something like the Rhombus Quanta at $99, which after a significant amount of weight can have performance in the realm of a boomstick. So to me, I really wondered if there was going to be a place for the Loco coming in around $180 and performance that might be slightly lesser or in between some of those other options. And man, was I pleasantly surprised after picking it up and using it extensively. When I started working on this review, it was 2 days before a tournament, and after my first session on the wide body, I decided to take the Loco to that tournament over my boomstick. Now, part of that was because I knew I needed to work on this review, but the other part was because I genuinely enjoyed using the paddle. As most of you know right now, I'm doing a YouTube series called Chasing 5-0, where I'm trying to hit 5-0 by the end of the year. So these tournament performances actually do matter a lot to me, and I'm not willing to sacrifice the result just to get a review done right now. If I'm going to take a paddle to a tournament, it has to genuinely perform as good or better than the paddle I'm currently maining, and since that first tournament with the Loco, I've continued to use it for 3 additional tournaments since then, and with even more coming up. So all of that to say, I have thoroughly been loving this paddle. Before we get into the control and power, I want to try and explain how the Loco feels at ball contact. It feels dense and more stiff. A complaint about some prior foam paddles was that they just felt very mushy or there wasn't a lot of feedback, but with the Loco having that fiberglass patch, it gives more feedback than something like the Carbon Genesis or Waves paddles, and as we've entered into more of these foam core paddles with EVA rings, they've started to get more responsive than prior foam paddles, and the Loco is included in that. With EVA rings, they've started to get more responsive than prior foam paddles. I would say that the Loco as a whole just feels very solid when you contact the ball. It's not as hollow feeling as some paddles, but with weight can still resemble some of that Gen 3 thuddiness that a lot of people really enjoy. To me, it kind of reminds me of a Gen 3 paddle if you just made it more dense and less hollow feeling. All right, now let's talk about control. The thing that stood out to me right away with the Loco was that it doesn't have the same level of pop as a boomstick, but what you gain out of that is a lot more control. I've loved the Boomstick. In fact, I think it's probably one of the best paddles you can buy if money is no object. But there are definitely times when the temps are colder and the ball is faster, which just makes controlling the pop of the Boomstick difficult. And when I started using the Loco, I feel like I still had really offensive options at the net, but it wasn't getting me into as much trouble in certain situations, or I just had higher confidence in those same situations with the Loco. The other difference that I think contributes to me controlling the Loco better is that the feel of the Boomstick is very stiff and very poppy. The ball wants to get off the face as quick as it can. While with the Loco, you kind of get that feeling of a slower rebound where the ball sinks in a bit, and this to me just makes the Loco feel a little bit less squirrely at times compared to the Boomstick. Or if you wanted that in more simple terms, the Boomstick feels like very immediate pop, where the Loco feels like there's a slight delay. I don't think one is objectively better or worse with those attributes. I think it's just different and depends on the player you are. You might have a preference for one over the other. But right now, I would say that in general, more people will have an easier time controlling the Loco than they will a Boomstick. You're just going to sacrifice some of that top-end pop and power to get it. But let's be real. Most people's issue isn't that they can't hit the ball hard enough, it's usually that they pop a mid-court reset up or hit a drop kind of high. My confidence level when it comes to anything related to the soft game on the Loco would probably be an 8 or 9 out of 10. And with the Boomstick, I'd probably say it's somewhere right around a 7. It's not bad, but if you told me I had to make as many drops or resets in a row as I could, my confidence would definitely be higher with something like the Loco. I think the only shot I would like a little bit more confidence in is my drops, but honestly, I think that's more about my game than it is the paddle. That's kind of just been an issue as a whole with me recently. So overall, in terms of control, I think the Loco has exceptionally good control given how much pop and power the paddle actually has. But don't get it confused. This is absolutely not a control paddle, and if you're coming from something very soft, there will absolutely be an adjustment period. But when compared to other foam options, it has a lot of power to offer, but has a very surprising amount of control for the power that you're getting. With a lot of other paddles, you usually end up making a sacrifice between control and power. Whereas with the Loco, I find that it actually does do a pretty good job blending both. Now, when it comes to power, ranking paddles for power has honestly gotten a bit convoluted with the paddles that are coming out these days. So many new foam paddles have come out, and some of them, like the Quanta, it really depends on how much weight you add to the paddle versus stock. And then you have other paddles like the Gearbox GX2 Power that break in as you use them and get even faster. So there's quite a few variables when it comes to ranking paddles for pop and power these days. And everyone's experience is a little bit different depending on the weight setup or how long one of the paddles has been used. So with all of that being said, my perception of this paddle's pop and power is that it sits below paddles like the Selkirk Boomstick, Luz Inferno, Rhombus Quanta, but only if we are assuming that the Quanta has around 15 grams of weight, Gearbox GX2 Power after it breaks in, and the Body Helix Flick F1. So to me, I would probably put it more in the mid-tier power paddle range. It packs plenty of punch, but again, some of those top-end paddles when broken in / set up, the Loco would definitely feel like it isn't quite up there with those paddles. Regardless, the main point I want to make is that there aren't any shots where I felt like power was the problem. After playing with the Boomstick and the Quanta a bunch prior to this review, it's clear that it has less, but not in a way that makes it feel like it is severely lacking in comparison. I think of all of the foam paddles right now, the Loco, for my personal taste, has been one of the best blends between power and control. At times, the J2NF would feel like it was lacking power ever so slightly for how I'm wanting to play these days, but it did have extremely good control. And then at times under pressure, the Boomstick and Quanta would feel like it was a little bit too much to control. The Loco to me finds a really nice sweet spot between those paddles for my playstyle. Of course, your mileage may vary and it really comes down to personal preference and what you value more power or more control. Now let's talk about some weight setups. In my experience so far, I'm finding that these foam cores that have floating EVA rings around them tend to respond better to weight than most builds, and the Loco's no exception here. I threw on 10 grams of total weight, 5 on each side at roughly 3 and 9, and it made a very apparent difference right away. The sound of the paddle got a lot more thuddy, kind of like a lot of Gen 3 style paddles, and as you'd expect, just about everything felt more aggressive. So just know that my standpoint of this paddle's pop and power is coming from this weight setup on the wide body, because that's what I used for almost this entire review. And for those curious, the stats went from a 110 swing weight to 114, 7.34 twist weight to 8.39, and a static weight from 8.18 to 8.64. On the elongated, I didn't try adding any weight because 123 is already out of the range I prefer, and honestly, I didn't really feel like the elongated elongated was lacking that much for how I wanted to play, or at least I didn't think that weight was going to add more pros than the cons of slowing my hands down. If you're used to swinging heavy paddles and you already like elongated paddles, I'm sure that adding some weight around the bottom corners or just below 3 and 9 is going to be a really solid spot, but for me, that was probably going to be too much. For the hybrid, I tried a couple setups. I tried 12 grams, 6 on each side, and this was honestly a bit too much for the paddle when placing it at 3 and 9. The paddle just felt too sluggish, and I didn't really think that it needed all that extra weight. So for a lot of people out there, I think if you just took 3 grams on each side and either put that at 3 and 9 or right around the bottom corners, I think that would probably be a better spot for most people out there. For me, the biggest thing was just adding more plow through to the paddles, and that was the reason I was adding weight. I didn't really feel like the sweet spots needed to be increased that much or the power. I just wanted the paddle to not be pushed around by the ball quite as much. So honestly, weight setups are kind of just going to come down to personal preference and what you feel is missing from the paddle. Now for sweet spot, I don't think the wide body Loco sweet spot is as good as the wide body boomstick, but it also far outperforms something like a stock Rhombus Quanta or a Carbon Waves. So if you're someone who hates the idea of tinkering with lots of weight to make your paddle play well, then the Loco is going to beat out a number of the foam options that are out right now. But if you don't mind tinkering and weighting your paddles up, then I think you can make the Rhombus Quanta sweet spot pretty comparable with enough weight added, and then you would also save some money. Personally, I never found myself complaining about sweet spot on any of the Loco shapes, even in stock form. Of course, the stability of my wide body did go up even further after adding 10 grams to it though, and I do think that started to become more comparable to the boomstick, but overall, I feel like when I miss center on the boomstick, I still get a lot of power from it, and on the Loco, it definitely feels like there's more drop off compared to the boomstick. But to me, the boomstick is like one of the most oversized sweet spots that exists in pickleball, and then the Loco is probably still even bigger than average. It's just not as big as what the boomstick offers. So to wrap this whole thing up, Bread and Butter has never been known to have top of the line paddles, but I think that actually changes now. The Loco is a paddle that competes with the best of the best. The fact that it comes in all 3 shapes that are pretty standardized is also just icing on the cake to make it easier for more people to find the shape that fits them. To me, one of the greatest signs of how good a paddle is for my playstyle is when I can play and not think about the paddle at all, which is exactly how I would describe my experience with the Loco. The Loco surprised me a lot more than I was expecting, given how stiff the competition has gotten in both performance as well as price. But despite being even double what a Pro V-Sol or Rhombus Quanta is, I think the Loco still really does have a welcome place in the market. I've been using the Loco for almost a month straight now for all my tournaments and all of my serious training, and I really haven't wanted to put it down. The boomstick has been my backup, and I really haven't found a compelling reason to go back yet, at least for myself. If you already own a boomstick, I definitely don't think you need to go and buy a Loco. So if you're in the market for a rock solid foam paddle that just doesn't give you a lot of fuss or need a ton of customizing to be good, I think that's gonna be the Loco. To me, it takes almost everything that made the J2 NF great and just turned it up a dial or two for power and pop. Now, that doesn't mean the NF line is irrelevant. I would still highly recommend it for people looking to prioritize a power paddle that is very, very easy to control. But if you didn't like the Bible verse or you just wanted more juice, then the Loco's the answer. The 2 biggest gripes I've been able to think of is just that their warranty is lower than most foam paddles on the market right now. Bread and Butter's at 6 months, while many of the competitors are offering 1 year or even up to a lifetime warranty. So if warranty is really important, just keep that in mind. And then lastly would just be the elongated shape being kind of heavy, at least the unit that I received. But if you're using an elongated shape already, that might not be a problem for you. So who is the Loco for and who isn't it for? The Loco is for people who are 1, looking for a foam paddle that doesn't need a lot of customization to perform well. 2, liked the idea of the J2NF but really didn't want the Bible verse or wanted more traditional shapes. And 3, are in the market for a new power paddle. Now, it's not for people who, 1, recently bought some of the other great foam options. I feel like I have to say this in almost every review now, but if you already have a J2NF, a Rhombus Quanta, a boomstick, or really any of the other amazing foam options that are out there right now, then I really don't think you need to go and buy a Loco. I know a lot of people get FOMO when they see reviews like this and they're like, oh, maybe that one's just a little bit better than the one I already have. All of these paddles are awesome, guys. I wouldn't sweat it. This is largely for people who are in the market for a brand new paddle. 2, it's not for people looking for a very light paddle. While these aren't particularly heavy, if you are someone who really needs a low static or low swing weight paddle, the Loco isn't that, and the slightly higher static weights might feel limiting to some players. And then finally, it's not for people who want a soft, plush feel at ball contact. The Loco is more stiff than it is soft. So props to Bread and Butter. I think they have one of the best full foam paddles you can buy right now, and I definitely didn't have on my bingo card using a Bread and Butter paddle as my main, but it's pretty hard to deny how well this thing plays. At this point, I anticipate using this for the foreseeable future unless something way better comes out, but who knows? The market's always changing constantly. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.